So let's talk about some of the things I wish I knew before playing Final Fantasy 16. There were quite a few moments where I made a few mistakes here that I kinda regret now. Plus there are many ways to improve Clive's power and even get some really cool item unlocks. So we're gonna talk about that in this video. Coming up first, the most important combat mechanic you should know of is the stagger bar, since this is going to greatly amplify your damage. There are two stagger phases you can bring an enemy into. One is the soft stagger, which doesn't last very long, and it triggers once you bring an enemy's will bar, this yellow one right here below the HP, at 50%. The second one is the full stagger, which happens once you completely deplete it, resulting in a much longer stun. However, both of these give you the exact same benefit, which is boosting your damage against that target by up to 150%. This means you can massively improve your damage and take that enemy down much faster if you save your strongest hitting skills for this moment. But you don't have to actually wait until the enemy is fully stunned, and instead can have the same benefit by simply going into that soft stagger phase, since the damage amplifier is exactly the same. In this case, you will want to unleash your attack as soon as you see the enemy getting partially stunned. Since time actually slows down very hard during skills, you can take full advantage of that time window despite how short it might be for the stun to last at just the soft stagger phase. Plus, this way you can squeeze in 2, maybe even more burn phases in a single fight, since most of the attacks have low cooldowns anyway. And speaking of staggering, I suggest having at least 2 skills with this as high as possible in your build. You can see how much each skill does in terms of damage against either HP or will by looking at the star rating on it, where the sword indicates damage against health bars and the stars means damage against the will bars, aka stagger. I already talked about Scarlet Cyclone, Diamond Dust, and Upheaval in the other video being some great early and late game sources of stuns, so I strongly recommend checking that as well as the combos I covered in the previous video. However, an even earlier combo you can do to stun enemies much faster is to use the magic burst against targets at the end of each melee hit. So just to show you an example, mashing my melee attacks barely does any damage, especially to that stagger bar. But if I press a quick triangle and do a ranged attack at the end of each melee hit, this is what happens. Essentially, I'm burning that will bar twice as fast as before. Now, this is a high level enemy, but for lower level ones, it's going to be even faster. Finally, the last tool you'll want to master combat-wise is Precision Evade. This amazing ability lets you dodge through literally anything. So it's not just enemy hits, but also large devastating AoE attacks such as dragons casting a fire breath or anything that just destroys the whole zone. There are even one-shot mechanics that you can completely avoid by simply doing a precision evade at the right moment, just as the enemy is about to hit. Now, there's also another mechanic which deals with parries. There's actually a parry window you can pull off by hitting an enemy with a melee attack just before they hit you with theirs. It's kind of like hitting someone in their hand as they swing an attack, if I were to explain it more easily. This, however, isn't something you can casually rely on, since timing is actually going to be very tricky here. But if you do manage to pull this one off, it's going to give you a massive boost in damage and a really cool slow time effect. So I just wanted to let you know about it. At number 4, let's talk about ability upgrades. If you look at all of these skills, most if not all of them can be upgraded from a few hundred to several thousand ability points each. Early on, you'll want to just focus on unlocking them first, since that's going to be expensive enough anyway, but a lot of them can provide extended duration and extra charges in the late game once you get a lot more AP. So for example, Arm of Darkness starts with just 3 ranks of Zantetsuken, but you can upgrade that to go all the way to level 5, which is going to give you a much better charge and a much bigger damage burst. Flames of Rebirth similarly can have an extended duration with new tiers, which means you can build the limit break much faster, but this goes, as I've said, for pretty much all other skills. Another good thing to note about these abilities is that if you master them, which means fully investing all the attribute points and leveling them up to max, you can then place them in any other icon power. So let's say, for example, you really like the Diamond Dust from Shiva's powers, but you don't actually like using that power and switching to it. In this case, if you max out Diamond Dust, for example, you can go ahead and put it in something like the Titan Power and instead roll with that, but also have access to Shiva's Diamond Dust. Or for example, if you really like the Arm of Darkness or Odin's Power but want to also use the Giga Flare, I maxed out the Giga Flare from Behemoth's Power and I was able to place it with this one as well. This only works if you max out these skills, by the way, so do keep that in mind. Also, keep in mind that you can fully respec these without losing any ability points. So if you unlocked a new skill, for example, and you don't want to use the old ones or you found them to be lacking, you don't have to keep the points stuck in them. You can just go ahead, reset that, and you will be reimbursed the full number of ability points that you invested in that skill. That's why you can then use this into something new that you unlocked, and maybe it's much more powerful and useful right away, so you can constantly do this without fear of losing any extra points. At number 6, another mistake you can do is waste money early on to buy weapons or gear from vendors. Yes, I know it does sound tempting given the fact that these vendors constantly get new loot as you progress in the game, but you can actually get a weapon for free every few levels simply via blacksmithing. This starts with Stormcry early on that you can craft, I believe, just with the mats that drop from defeating Geruda. But as you progress and encounter new icons and defeat them via the main story, you get new mats from them which you can then use to upgrade the previous sword into new versions much more powerful as you level up. So in this case it goes to Flame Tongue and Levin Bolt all the way up to Everdark, which gives you all the way up to 315 damage. This should suffice until much later when you can get a 375 damage sword, but I'm going to cover that in a different video, so if you want to see a guide for that, let me know down below in the comments. For the remaining gear, you can probably get a few along the way from the vendors if you want to, but in that case, I suggest to not waste any resources to reinforce them just yet. It looks tempting again, but you'll replace these in no time, and there are craftable versions in the late game that are much stronger. Also, you can check this video I posted earlier about some free options you can get early on without wasting any additional resources. At number 7, another tip I have is to explore literally everything. And yes, I do know it sounds quite intuitive, but specifically you will need that to unlock these fast travel pylons. Once you unlock a pylon, this will appear on your actual map menu, so you can then fast travel right away from it. And by the way, each of these pylons on the map don't necessarily imply a different zone. They can all be part of the same zone. It's just that different areas within it that you can discover and now appear on that map menu. A lot of early on areas can be off limits too, which will eventually unlock as you complete the main story missions. But a few might have a different route that you can take, so even if you see them locked from this side, check if there aren't any adjacent zones that have you reach them from the other side. Plus, this will be all useful in the end game or if you want to complete some of the side content, which you definitely do for some of the upgrades and unique rewards. By the way, quick tip about the minimap, you can actually check if there's any available bounties in that location so that you can more easily identify them. You just have to press square while hovering over any of these fast travel points and it will show you any available marks if you've unlocked them. It's still not going to show you where they are precisely on the map, you still have to follow the bounty board for that, but it will give you a general idea that you're on the right track. At number 9, you don't always have to buy your potions from vendors, especially if you're low on gil. I'm not sure why you would be, but you don't have to always go back in town. You still can, however, before any major fight, and I still recommend doing it. And the second one is by just respawning. So you can actually tactically perish in order to replenish your entire stock of all the consumables and just go back into the fights as it never even happened. Now, on top of this, the game also offers you a handful of accessories that further help you to bring that difficulty down. And I will cover these, though I'm not using them actively. The best thing about them is that they don't disable trophies, so if you have any trouble with the game, you can totally still use them. Or if you're just doing some mindless farm, you can totally put these on. So there are about a handful of these. One of the best is probably going to be the Ring of Timely Evasion. This makes Clive auto-dodge an incoming attack, which actually helps a ton if you don't like the placement of the R1 button. or if you don't enjoy some of the other controller layouts. Another one is the Ring of Timely Assistance. This just helps a lot so you don't have to bother controlling Torgal as it casts its attacks and other skills automatically for you. There's also Timely Strikes and Timely Healing, though I would not advise these. Timely Strikes just tends to cast all your strongest attacks without any consideration for the stun phases, and usually you're better off to just do it manually as it kind of tends to waste them. Plus, the healing one just spams your potions way too often, and again, you want to be a little bit more decisive with those. This is pretty much it with it. Let me know down below if you have any other tips that I might have missed. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.